The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame.
Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm Raygan Kelly, and I'm here this week with my one true co-host,
Nate Heininger.
And this week we are bringing you an episode about a game that respects your time, and hopefully this episode will also respect your time. We're talking about Vampire Survivors. One of the slighter things that we've covered on the show, but also I think something that I think is kind of worth talking about a little bit. Just a weird, neat little thing to happen in the world of games.
Yeah, I've been really enjoying playing this. I don't often jump into games like Early Access, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, but this game, I kept seeing recommendations for it, and then even in the Discord, people were recommending it as something that particularly I would like, and I finally jumped in, and everyone's exactly right. I love this game.
We're also jumping into this trend that was huge in January.
Yeah.
I haven't heard much about in the last month or so. So, as per usual, we are well behind the time.
Naturally.
Vampire Survivor was one of those things that was sort of inescapable in the video game conversation around January, and it's kind of a weird thing to have happened. It's a game that really virally blew up especially on Twitch and YouTube, and at one point had what was the number that was hitting?
At least
on Twitch?
The article we were looking at had it peaked at 77,000 people were playing it one time on Steam. I don't know how many were streaming it on Twitch, but for a game made by a lone developer that is in early access, 77,000 concurrent players is pretty wild and really interesting, especially for a game like this.
I think I can kind of see why this became such a success. Always there's the element of like complete random chance and luck there, right? You know, the right YouTuber makes the right video at the right time and it hits with the right audience. The right Twitch streamers pick it up at the right time, and you know, somebody makes a funny joke on stream while they're playing this and everyone repeats it, and suddenly everyone is you know, aware of this game in a way that they weren't previously.
I don't know,
it's
Raygan, you're sounding kind of sus right now.
But this is like a $3 game that began as like a HTML5 thing on itch.io. It eventually got released on Steam, and it's surprising that this has hit as large of an audience as it has. It has this like incredible level of, and I say this with love, absolute jank. This is a weird janky game from a lone developer that has hit pretty widely, and I don't know. I had a blast playing it. I found it actually extremely compelling and addictive. So yeah. I wanted to talk about the game itself, but I mean, you know, is there anything else to say about its weird viral popularity before we dive into talking about the game itself?
No, not necessarily. I was going to say that you talk about the jank. The jank is real, but it's also maybe the most understandable jank that I've ever experienced in a game. Once you get going and the pure insanity that is happening on the screen, you kind of expect some jank with something so absurd happening when you really get going in this game. But no, I mean, I think like I don't generally engage in early access games. I honestly think the last time I did an early access game was Kerbal Space Program, which actually is one of my fondest gaming memories of all time, was getting into Kerbal Space Program early.
That game really, and that was like a perennial early access game. It was in early access until they announced a sequel or something.
Yeah.
I forget, but forever.
I mean, it was wonderful. I mean, truly landing on the moon it still ranks as one of my highest like game accomplishments, and for the challenge that it felt for me really early on in that game when it was really early in development. Which also, my landing on the moon, my ship exploded on impact, but somehow my what do they call it? My Kerbal survived the impact. So my first landing on the moon was just a single Kerbal landing alive on the moon, and I spent the rest of my time on that game trying to craft a moon lander that could land, pick him up, and bring him home. And so it became this sort of, what do they call that? Emergent gameplay or whatever. The whole thing was phenomenal. I learned about orbits and all it.
That is a perfect emergent gameplay moment. The like, bring him home.
Yeah. Bring him home.
That's like the plot of The Martian or something right there.
A lot of Kerbals died trying to get that Kerbal home.
Oh man.
But
you can't just leave him there.
No, of course not. But there was enough appeal that I saw about this game. Obviously the hype. I bought into the hype. And then also, frankly, $3. Like, I get one of the things that one of the things that keeps me away from early access games, besides my desire, just like, I'll just wait. I'm patient. But there's enough games. I don't need to get into a game early. But a lot of early access games are charging. And I try not to think too much about price, when I can. But like a lot of the early access games are charging near what the price of the game is going to be anyway when it's all said and done. So I just think I'll just wait till it's a complete product and I'll buy it and I'll play it. This game, $3, like almost no barrier to entry. Support the developer, give it a shot. And I think this sort of game works well for something like early access. So
I think in particular though, like one of the things that the developer said about why how he approached this game, which was I think in an interview he did with Vice, was he was talking about how he was kind of created this game because he wanted to have sort of an exercise in community management, which is an interesting approach. Like that's the thing that early access really does is like you get an opportunity to build something, most of the way or part way. And then from there forward, you're kind of hopefully involving a community, adding content, releasing it regularly, etc. And I think it's really interesting to think about like, this is a game that he created because it was something that he could manage as a single solo developer and continue to add content to periodically. He wanted to create something that he could kind of like drop new content every weekend or something.
Yeah.
And it definitely, you can see that, playing out here. So I don't know, really, really interesting approach. And you don't really see people approaching game development as a community management exercise very much.
I saw that too. And I was like, man, what kind of maniac wants to go and manage a community as their desire? That seems so unappealing to me. But I do think that's a cool cause for this, and it does make sense. And I'm not inherently against early access at all. I think it's a great service, and some great games come out of it, and games are made better because of it. Hades is a great
Hades, Hades is going to be my exact example. But that's another one where like I didn't play it until it came out with a 1.0 on Switch because I was like, I know I'm only going to play this thing once probably. That actually didn't turn out to be the case with Hades. Went back to it a zillion times.
That's maybe my favorite developer, Supergiant. I was like, no, I'll just wait. I'm content to wait, But something about
it makes sense to hear like the common thread there is that they're both roguelikes. This is essentially a roguelike in the same way that Hades is. And I think something about that early access model works particularly well for run-based games because you are going to be coming back to it periodically to just do one more run. And if the developers added some new stuff, a new weapon or whatever, then that just is additive to your run. You're not just like playing through a plot and it's missing a chapter until you come back 10 months later or something like that. So,
well, in this game, like Hades, is all about balance. And if you're going to make a game like this, you're either going to need to have extensive playtesting to make sure your balance is tight, or something like early access. So a lone developer does not have the budget likely to playtest something to the degree that you would really want to test your balancing and the way this game scales. There's so many different weapons and combos and ways things play off of each other. Bringing in a community to help you test it and make it better, I think is very smart, and especially for a game exactly like this, because you never know how a player base is going to utilize the tools that you've created. And so why not just bring them in early and let them let them help you test it. So there's a lot of that, which is also what led to me being like, all right, I'm going to take the plunge. This game seems great. I'm excited. I'm going to give it a shot. And I think besides all those reasons why this game has clicked and all the reasons why it makes sense to be an early access game, I think this game is maybe the most pure source of video game dopamine that I have played in a long time. It is insane how satisfying and insane twice in the same sentence, how like over the top absurd this game can get, and just how fun it is to just mow down wave after wave after wave of tiny little pixelated monsters. I mean, by the end, you are destroying literally tens of thousands, if not into the 100,000s of monsters in a single run. And I don't know of any other game where you are getting anywhere close to that degree of destruction with weapons flinging and flying. It's bullet hell. Someone in the Discord called it, this is a bullet hell game, but you're the bullet. It's insane.
I like that.
Yeah,
it is really satisfying to see those sort of like math. I was just doing a run here recently where I got pretty high up there. I didn't quite make it to the finish line, but suddenly I realized this is sort of like watching popcorn popping, but for like 30 minutes. It's like watching just like, at first things start slow. And you're working for every pop. And then by the time the things really get going, it's like the moment when your popcorn is really going, and it just goes.
Yeah, but then it just keeps going, and then there's bigger popcorn kernels, and now and it never stops, and it fills up your whole house with popcorn, and then it spreads through the neighborhood, and then suddenly the entire country is covered in popcorn.
God, we can only dream.
I love popcorn. Me
too, man. Oh, this has been a big popcorn time for me. This is a total sidebar, but now we're talking about popcorn, and I'm not pulling the stick back. We built our big home theater setup earlier,
nice.
late last year, and it's been amazing. And a big part of that has been, I was like, I need popcorn, and I hadn't bought like just straight up bags of popcorn, like a big Costco box of bags of popcorn in a really long time. And so I started doing popcorn again, and man, that's an addictive and dangerous thing. Doing the whole like, I'm just gonna make a bag of popcorn,
dude. That has been
every time I think about it, I'm like, oh, but I could just make another bag of popcorn.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's dangerous.
Yeah, popcorn has been like my go-to like evening, snack for basically my entire life. And in the last year or so, I've gotten really into doing. I've moved away from microwave popcorn, even though I love it. And I've started doing.
Oh, teach me, sensei.
Stove popcorn, make it on the stove. And I got this new popcorn salt that is this like combination of dehydrated butter, nutritional yeast, salt, a little bit of pepper. It's all the things that people put on popcorn.
What?
And it is glorious. I truly enjoy it better than microwave popcorn, which I'd always had this relationship with like stovetop popcorn where it's like, this is less good, but it's like a tenth of the calories, and it's a lighter snack than microwave popcorn. But it always felt like this is not nearly as satisfying as microwave popcorn, and it was that balance of lightness versus like the butter crusted microwave popcorn that I love.
That's what I love.
Yeah, for sure. And go to a movie, I'm getting the tub. I love popcorn. And anyway, so this salt, and I'm trying to find the name of it. I don't want to. I'll see if I can find it while we're talking, or I'll put it in the show
later if we got to. Yeah, in the show notes if we can.
I'll put it in the show notes. But no, actually,
or just text me. Just text me, Nate.
It's called Bitterman's Buttery Popcorn Salt, and it is so good. It's so good. I've started putting it on other things. I put a little pinch in my mouth in the morning,
buying a popcorn popper, one of those like the machines that does it. Have you ever had the popcorn popping machine thing? I've never done that.
What do you mean, like a air popper or like
yeah, I think. Yeah. I don't know enough about it. I'm just like, I'm ready to take my popcorn game up a notch from the microwave, but I don't know what to do next.
I don't have one of those. I've had popcorn from it. It's fine. There's something nice about the stovetop with the oil. I think it makes it a little bit crispier than like an air pop popcorn. But again, an air pop popcorn is another step towards healthier choice, because if you're just doing raw like popcorn and salt that's been air cooked, it is a very, very it's a very healthy snack. But on the other side of that, what I thought maybe you were saying, my parents have one of those like carnival, school fair things where like it's got the hanging metal basket, that you load up with the popcorn,
what I'm talking about.
and it shoots out. Yeah. And we'll use that sometimes for like, kids' birthday parties, or one time I took it with me to work, and it was awesome. And,
listeners, if you have the secrets to taking your popcorn game up a notch from the microwave, and you've got the thing that I need to be shopping for, let me know. I'm ready for this to be my next fussy coffee setup. Like I spend too much time making coffee. Now I'm going to like spend too much time and effort and money making popcorn, and I'm prepared for that. So let me know what your secrets.
That's a nice thing. I mean, nothing's going to beat a 3-minute bag of microwave popcorn, but the stovetop with the salt that I'm talking about, you can make the whole thing from nothing. Use sunflower oil, do it. It'll take you 10, maybe 15 minutes, but it's worth it. It's so good.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, we're talking about a game, right? Now that we've had 15 minutes of popcorn talk, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah.
So yeah, where were we? We were talking about let's talk about the mechanics of this thing, or where were we? Do we have some important thing to say before
we're talking about popcorn?
We're talking about popcorn.
I got a couple more things to say about popcorn. No,
all right.
We're just saying, like, my point, what led to the popcorn was that I think this game is also got so massive just because of how purely enjoyable it is. And then also how simple it is. It's not easy, but it's simple. So it's easy to pick up, easy to start playing. And then once you understand it, once you get going, it's pure joy. So yeah, if you haven't played this game, I guess let's spend a little bit of time talking about the core mechanics of it.
Yes. Let me do my best. So it's a roguelike in that, you choose a character to play as, you choose a level, you unlock those things progressively as you go. And then you are just a little knockoff Castlevania sprite walking around a knockoff Castlevania level, not a platformer, but basically just imagine mostly big empty fields in a sort of vaguely Castlevania look. Playing top down, I guess, but all the characters are illustrated from the side on, which is another area where this thing, it's jank, right? Like there's no aesthetic taste to this.
Oh, I love it. Everyone's flat, but you move on a.
Oh yeah.
I don't know.
Visuals
is it
like
isometric, but everyone's laying down. I don't.
Kind of. It looks a bit like they clearly grabbed some royalty-free art assets here. Like the developer said that at some point he had bought a pack of like knockoff Castlevania sprites as like a royalty-free art asset pack, and he said that he had spent £1,100, so about $1,500 on art and music for the game that was royalty free, meaning that he can use it without paying back royalties to the person who created it as a sellable thing, which is something that a lot of developers do. There's no shame in this. This is a totally normal thing, especially that small devs and solo devs do. They'll buy art assets that are royalty free, meaning that they don't have to hire somebody to do art for their work. They just buy a pack of things and they can use it in their game, and they can still sell the game without having to pay royalties. No big deal. But this is like Z grade royalty free art, in my opinion. Like really bad, ugly pixels, not good looking. They're fine, and the there's a good variety. The one thing that I'll say for it is that there are tons and tons and tons of different monsters. The monsters are just like they're not animated. They're just totally immobile little monster sprites that mostly just sort of like move in vaguely straight lines directly for you. But yeah, you are a little dude. You are going around, and the key thing here is that you're collecting various different weapons and attacks, but you're never hitting a button to do any of the attacks. All of the attacks are on timers. Something a little bit like things like, well, actually, it's not really the right. I was going to say it's a little bit like something like an MMO where you're just sort of like hitting, a key every 15 seconds on a cooldown.
Yeah.
But you don't even have to hit the key here because every attack you do is just on a timer where it goes every n seconds or happens constantly. And all you are worried about is walking around. You're controlling where your character walks, but all of your weapons are firing automatically, either just in a particular direction, like facing ahead of you, or homing in on enemies nearby, or whatever. Different weapons do different stuff.
Yeah. Speaking about the art, I agree 100%. My daughter was watching me play, and she's really into just like monsters and stuff like that, and knows most of the classic monsters. And she's like, "What's that thing?" And I'm like, "I don't know." "Well, what's that thing?" "I don't know." "What's that thing?" I truly don't know what that thing is supposed to be.
That's a monster.
Yeah, it's like weird faces, little swirling. Actually, she said one of them looks like it's a real sign of the time and what she's been raised in. She said one of them looks like the coronavirus. Like she, they're like indeterminable monsters, like a green bulbous thing, a stretchy, scary face, like a mummy sort of thing. But it doesn't really matter because they're only going to be on the screen for a couple seconds before they get pulverized by whatever insane combination of weapons that you have going. And yeah, there really is there's no button pressing other than you're moving around using, if you're playing on keyboard, ASWD, or the standard arrows, and that's it. And like the strategy of the game, there is some ideal sort of pathing that you can take depending on what weapons you're using, where you are kind of like kiting or circling the monsters in a certain way in order to avoid being hit, but bringing them into the range of your weapons, or just positioning yourself in the right spot on the map so that everything just runs into the maelstrom of insanity that is surrounding your character, and just everything's getting vaporized. But it's really about like the challenge of the game comes from your weapon selection and the way in which you maneuver your guy in order to best utilize the weapon selection. And that's where the game actually, I think, does start to get pretty dense, and why it has such replayability. Everything about controlling it is simple. The design is simple. The UI is very, very simple. But there's a broad range of either weapons or power-ups. You can select up to 6 weapons per run and 6 power-ups. Each weapon has its own, it's very distinct ability. So there'll be like, the first character you play starts with a whip, and its basic level is it just on a timer. It's about every maybe, 2 seconds or so. It whips out in front of the character, maybe like a quarter, maybe like a sixth of the screen or so, and everything that's in that range, it whips out in front of the character. So if you're, whatever way you're facing, it'll whip out and it'll do damage. Early on, it's enough damage to kill whatever in front of you. It'll also push enemies back a little bit. As you level up, you will unlock the ability to level up your various weapons and power-ups. So that whip, what might start as a basic whip, will eventually power up to this like insane whirlwind sort of thing where you are throwing out like 6 or 7 whips at a time that are in front of you and behind you and up. There's other weapons that are like fireballs, a Bible that spins around you, an axe that just sort of pops out of you and deals damage. And all of them have their own power-ups or their own leveling system. And then there's a range of power-ups that do classic RPG stuff, like increase your armor, increase your damage, increase the range of your weapons, things like that. And it's up to you to kind of pick which ones you want. Every time you level up, you get a selection. It's randomized. And that's where the strategy really comes in, is what weapons are you going to take? Which ones are you going to level up in what order? And how are you going to maneuver your little person in order to completely utilize those weapons? And there's so many that it makes it a pretty deep game, at least from my opinion.
It is surprisingly deep, and I've had. How far have you gotten with it so far? Because I know that this is early access, but like there's not. There is kind of an end game with this game. You can upgrade or sort of evolve the various weapons and items, and that requires doing pretty long runs to do. I know there's a kind of a threshold at like 30 minutes, and I have only I've been getting really close to it. I've played this game for about 6 hours, just in various little short spurts, but I've never actually hit 30 minutes. I've hit 30, or I've hit 29 and like
I can't believe that
50 seconds or something like that, like an absurdly close number, but I've never actually hit 30 minutes. So what is that like actual? I don't think you can call it an end game here, but like what happens at 30 minutes and what is that final upgrade process like?
Yeah. So that's another thing that we haven't really talked about yet, and why I think this game, does respect your time. Besides all the roguelike elements, roguelikes are short games. I'll repeat that forever, but or roguelikes do respect your time. But also this game has a hard 30-minute. I will continue to die on that hill. Roguelikes respect your time. But anyway, they at 30 minutes, everything on the screen goes away, and death, which is like a really cheesy little Reaper sprite, shoots onto the screen and deals insane damage to you, and you die. That's it. That's the end of the game. You get a bonus for succeeding 30 minutes. You get a gold bonus, which Raygan said, there's permanent upgrades you can make, classic, roguelite stuff. And it's over. And that is considered a successful run, is surviving, vampire surviving, even though there are no vampires, for 30 minutes. And there are multiple different stages. The stages kind of increase in difficulty to a degree. So your goal is to make it 30 minutes. And once you die from death, you just start over. It's kind of anticlimactic, but the whole ramp up, especially like the 20 to 30 minute mark, is so climactic that it kind of is like a cool down. You just get wasted really quickly by death. Now, technically, there are some maniacs out there who figured out ways to like trick the system and essentially exploit the mechanics to actually kill death, which I think is awesome. And I hope that the creator like leans into that ability to kill death. But it's a total exploit. Like death's level is based off of your level at 30 minutes. So you have to do this insane thing to not actually level up at all until you spawn death, and then you quickly grab all the experience, level up to get really strong, and then you can. It's a lot, but you can do it. And I think I assume this is part of where this game will see most of its expansion, besides the addition of more weapons and more levels. I kind of like that the ending is just this sort of anticlimactic. No matter how good you're doing, you're going to get killed no matter what. But the game has a series of increasing bosses that come out, and you fight them. And when you destroy them, you get a treasure chest. And I will say that I don't think there's a more joyous thing in video games than opening a chest in Vampire Survivors.
It is just an explosion with special music. It's great.
The music, the imagery, what's going on. It is joyous every time. I've opened hundreds at this point, and I watch it with satisfaction every time. But anyway, so you're fighting these like increasingly scaled bosses. And I assume that at some point there will be more of a like end game to this, where maybe there's like the toughest boss of all, or some sort of boss rush or something like that.
Yeah.
and they just haven't gotten there yet with the development, or not. I don't know.
Part of what I wonder about with this is like, obviously the like long-term play here is to continue adding new stuff, and at some amount of that has to be extending the session, right? Like, this pretty much has a soft cap at 30 minutes with death showing up.
Not a soft cap. It's a hard cap. Other than these goofy exploits, you will die to death. It comes out at like, I was reading the equation is like, it takes your level and adds 650,000 HP for every level that you are. So if you're level 100, you can get into the hundreds of levels. It's coming out with like millions of HP when most things are in the hundreds, so it is not, you're not supposed to be able to beat it. It's only because of the like jankiness of the game that people are beating it. So,
but I'm like, I don't think there's much further that they can go than about 30 minutes with the setup they've devised here. Like how busy would it actually be much more fun? Like, let's say that they were going to extend this to an hour-long session. Once you reach a certain density of characters on screen and you're just mowing them down with like just stand there and let the lightning strike them all and, just sort of rake in the experience points without needing to do much of anything. Is it really worth extending? So I think maybe it's really smart that they have this kind of like, good job, you made it. Here's your prize, which is losing. Is like, it makes a lot of sense that it happens at about that stage, because almost any farther than that, and you're just going to be standing there, letting the lightning strike things and stuff.
I think it's pretty critical that it ends at 30 minutes. Now, they are saying they want to develop an endless mode, but endless mode is different than extending the goalpost to an hour to me. So I'm cool with an endless mode because it would be kind of fun. Sometimes you get these like perfect combinations that truly feel overpowered, and they're kind of hard to get. And it can be kind of disappointing at 30 minutes when it's done. You're like, oh, my golden run is over. So I could see why an endless mode would be fun, just to see how far you can test the limits. But otherwise, I think the 30 minutes is great. I think that they need to.
I wonder if there's any way to make that like mechanically interesting. What like the problem here is like, once you get fully leveled up, or you get a significant number of these upgrades, you're just invincible until something smacks you down in a totally unfair way. So I don't know, like, how do you introduce like a boss that comes at you in a way that makes that end game interesting or whatever?
Well, the game is doing a lot of under the hood calculations, which I think is really cool. And another reason why I think this game has been successful, especially in a streaming capacity, it is tracking the amount of damage that you're doing for every single weapon, which gets into the millions when you have a complete run. It's tracking how many of everything you've killed. It's tracking the DPS of the weapons that you've used. It tracks everything. So I would imagine that they could possibly create some sort of scaling system that like introduces bosses that are based off of your current DPS capacity or something like that. But I have no idea what their intent is. I do think that they need to solve for what you are kind of talking about here, though, is that once you get powerful enough, truly the best strategy is to just stand there and let everything enter into your into the hellhole that is the center of the screen. And that is fun and satisfying when you get to that point. But it's also kind of weird that like peak this game is not even touching the game anymore. It's just watching. And that feels a little unsustainable.
You still kind of want to move around a little, even if you are like completely uber powerful. Eventually, like it will still send like either fast moving enemies at you who will make it past your, sphere of pain or whatever and get in and touch you. Or also you still need to move around a little bit to hoover up all of the little like gems, right?
Yes, but there's a way in which the game calculates experience that is interesting too, is that and I don't totally understand how this works. I've generally avoided reading too much about the like actual strategy because I like to figure these games out myself. But one thing I have that I kind of understand is that there's only so much experience that can be seen on the screen at one time. And once you've reached that capacity, it starts to build up outside of your screen in the form of these really dense experience points gyms, to where when you pick one up, it might level you up like 10 times if you've been waiting long enough. And so again, one of the better strategies is to just sit still, let everything run into you and die for quite a while. And then you spend, like 30 seconds moving around, collecting all these dense experience gems. And then you go right back to standing still. It's one of the most effective ways to level up. But it's not necessarily the most fun, but this game is definitely also very much about min-maxing and seeing how much DPS can you put out. So I don't know. I do think long term they're going to need to solve something for that. Like there needs to be some sort of challenge that keeps you moving, keeps you engaged, other than, like you said, every once in a while a boss gets through and you need to move a couple of inches, but not always, because some of the weapons all have pushback, and most things won't get through that.
Yeah, you're right. I wonder if they even need to solve this stuff though. Like these are like finer points where if their goal is to continue developing this in a way that makes it more mechanically interesting at high levels, they're going to have some interesting game design problems to solve.
Yeah.
But I'm not actually sure they even need to bother, because this is really just a game that, at least the way that I was engaging with it, was this is a game that is a turn off brain,
yes, and
press release valve in between other things. And it works really well for that. It has that feeling that, for me, it's totally a different gameplay thing. But for me, it's a similar kind of vibe to the way I kind of turn off my brain and play a level of Alto's Adventure or Alto's Odyssey, which is my perennial favorite mobile game. By the way, total side note, Alto's Adventure just came out with a sort of remake version on Apple Arcade that they just released. It's the original Alto game, not the new one, not the second one, and it has some additional content, and I'm always happy to go back to that game. It's out now, unlocked a new character. New content in a game I've been playing for 8-10 years or whatever.
We've been doing this show long enough to for the games that we've covered kind of around when they came out to now be getting remasters and remakes.
I know.
But complete opposite vibe of Alto's.
Yeah, opposite vibe, but serving a similar purpose for me, right? Because this is something that, if I get frustrated in Elden Ring, which I've been doing a lot of lately, and I quit out of that and I want to spend 15 minutes doing something else where I can turn my brain off, this is a great thing for that.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to do really well on mobile if they make it there. I think, I saw the developer writing about that on their sort of devlog on Steam, where they're trying to solve some engine issues. This is a game that just throws so many things on screen that they're really pushing up against the limits of the chosen.
It will kind of grind to a halt at times. I don't know if that happened to you. I mean, I'm playing it on a new computer, and it becomes clear that it's not my computer that's having a problem. It's the game itself is having a hard time processing all of the information that's happening on the screen. I assume not just because of the visuals, but because of that back-end calculating that we're talking about. It is counting every creature that you kill and showing you on the screen. So you were getting into, I think one of my runs, I had 58 or 68,000 kills. I also think it's a good, for me, it's been a good podcast game. I'm almost always, if I'm not playing a game for the show, I typically am just sitting and playing one of whatever the most recent probably deck builder that we did for the show is. I'm still picking away at them, and I'll just sit and listen to podcasts or something like that. And this game has become that for me. Just listen to a podcast. You can pause whenever because it doesn't matter. You can pause and pick it up a week later, and it's going to be the exact same thing. You don't need to relearn anything. You just start right where you were, killing everything. And
if we haven't mentioned this, this is also a game that you can play one-handed, which I don't usually make that as a huge back of the box quote or whatever, but I will tell you that this is a game that I can play while I eat chips.
It's a good popcorn game. Your hands get so...
popcorn. Bring it back.
That buttery
you can eat popcorn.
Yeah, it's a good popcorn
while
game.
playing this game and not get any grease on your keyboard. And so that has made this fit into my life in ways that I was not expecting. So I recommend it for that purpose.
The look in Raygan's face and the processing that went through his head when he said, "This is a good one-handed game," was priceless. You're like, oh no, what have I said? Which direction?
Guys, there's nothing sexy about this game whatsoever. It's not that kind of one-handed. But it's definitely something that you can play while eating a snack.
Yes.
And that's a valuable thing in our lives.
Yes.
So what else is there to say about Vampire Survivors? I think practically nothing. We've now talked about it long enough that death is stalking us.
Oh no.
Even if you subtract the popcorn talk, I think we're now, over time for what we could, say about Vampire Survivors before being stalked by death. Before we wrap our show up, what's making you happy this week, Nate?
What a seamless transition. I watched a movie the other day that Molly and I watched, and I've been wanting to watch since it came out, and I'm very, very glad I did. Have you seen Palm Springs?
Yes. Oh my God, that movie rules.
Yeah, I know. So just like us being maybe a month late on Vampire Survivors, I'm like 2.5 years late on Palm Springs or whenever it came out. And the difficult part about recommending this in this moment is that I also really don't want to say very much about it if you haven't seen it. But I will say, if you're a fan of time loop movies, I don't think that's a spoiler. This is maybe my favorite of them. And that's saying a lot. There's some really fantastic movies that play on that trope. And it's fantastic. I'm also a huge Andy Samberg fan, and I think he's fantastic in this movie.
It's probably the best thing he's ever done.
Yeah. I don't know. I like everything that he does.
I don't dislike him, but like, this is so much better than most of anything else in his career. Like, it's such a great movie. Oh man.
Well, I
want to watch that again now.
It's a real, he's actually acting, and it's a complicated, challenging role. Unlike, most Andy Samberg, you're getting the same thing.
He's not just on a boat.
Well, if you watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine,
little bits of it, but not a lot. I've been meaning to get around to it, but comedies are a tough sell in my household. I don't know if I've ever really gone into this, on podcast, but my wife is like extremely anti-comedy in a way that's like, it makes her sound kind of weird. She just has different tastes. She likes horror movies. She's not into comedies. And so whenever I want to watch a comedy, it's like I have to find time where it's just me.
Yeah.
And so it's hard for me to get, especially it's hard for me to get into like lengthy comedies with lots of episodes. So I just don't ever end up getting around to them, even though I potentially might enjoy them. Like, I'm like, oh, that's on my list.
Well,
I've got when she's traveling the next time, maybe I'll watch a couple episodes of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but I have never gotten around to it.
I love Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It's like Parks and Rec in that it's a show where you just like everyone, even the like bad guys and the enemies of the show. You still like everyone. Is just fun and great. So I really like that show, and because of that and other things, I really like Andy Samberg. But this is a totally different thing. It's a more challenging and interesting role than any of the other stuff that he's done. And I wouldn't necessarily argue that it's the best thing he's done, because it's awesome. I highly recommend watching it. It is. It's funny, very, very heartwarming, and very, very interesting in a lot of different ways. I've it's been stuck in my head now for like 3 weeks now after having watched it. So I kind of want to just watch it again. Also, J.K. Simmons is in it, and I love J.K. Simmons.
Man, I need to check that out. So the thing that's made me happy this week, probably won't be a huge surprise to the video game playing public. I grabbed the new Kirby game, Kirby and the Forgotten Land.
Oh, hey, you didn't say Elden Ring. I thought that's what you were going to say. So that's why
that is also a thing I've been.
That's
playing
why I went. Ugh. But no, never mind. Go on. Kirby.
Yeah, in all honesty, I've been playing more Elden Ring than I have Kirby and the Forgotten Land. But Kirby and the Forgotten Land has been making me happy, where Elden Ring has been making me angry. It's an important distinction. Kirby is great. Kirby's always been great. Pretty much every Kirby game has been great, except if they're trying something really odd. This is Kirby's first 3D game, like fully 3D. This feels like the Mario Odyssey of Kirby games. It has this really strange vibe where it's, Kirby's always been like this adorable, uber powerful, cutesy pink sphere. And they always try to throw some little quirk or, new power up idea into games. The last Kirby game I really seriously played was Planet Robobot on the 3DS, which is also excellent. And there it had he's got a robot, but it's just a Kirby game. It just has a robot every now and then, right? This is the same thing. There's a gimmick now, which is this mouthful mode, which is very cute, where he can rather than turning into a little dude, he can get his mouth around extremely large objects that he can't actually swallow, like cars or vending machines or whatnot, and just control them. The car one is really the cute one.
Yeah.
Being able to control Kirby car is very cute. But mostly this is just Kirby moves into a more fully 3D game. And it's not quite on the level of something like Mario Odyssey, where it has that sort of open world feeling where you can kind of go around a really large space. It still has this sort of linear feel. I would say it's a little more on in the lane of something like Super Mario 3D World rather than something like Super Mario Odyssey. But it's just so full of charm. It's just unbelievably charming. And my daughter has been enjoying playing it along with me, both watching me play it and trying to control Kirby a little bit. And it's just so damn charming. It's wonderful. It's been getting great reviews, which I think it totally deserves. If you haven't played a Kirby game in a few years, go into it expecting that this is an easy game. It finds places around the margins to make it more interesting for people who are interested in more challenging platformers. But mostly this is just sort of like a fun thing to experience, a fun game for kids that also adults will enjoy. But my goodness, it's so cute. I really like it. So I can't recommend Kirby and the Forgotten Land enough. Go check it out. It's on Switch, and it's great.
It sounds wonderful. It's crazy that Nintendo's mainline games, it's like C tier is Kirby games, and Kirby games are always most of the time still incredibly delightful.
Absolutely. And I take umbrage at that. It is not a C tier Nintendo game. It is the A tier of HAL Labs. So
I
wholly owned subsidiary, but let Sakurai do something other than Super Smash Brothers for 10 minutes, and he turns out another banger like this.
That's fair. I knew C tier wasn't the right way to think to frame it, but it's they don't talk about. You don't see as much Kirby stuff from Nintendo, and I think it seems like they could mine that well so much more than they actually do. I think maybe from their perspective, it's the C tier character behind Mario and the Zelda franchise.
Yeah, for sure. But it's so nice to see them actually put a budget behind a Kirby game and have it be this gorgeous. It's really pretty. This is one of those games that I don't know if you've been following the Switch emulation scene. I hadn't really until fairly recently when I looked up some videos. Oh my goodness, people emulating things like the new Metroid on higher end PCs and running games at higher resolutions and higher frame rates and things like that, because the Switch hardware is really starting to feel a little long in the tooth, and it's emulation of the Switch has come pretty far. And this is one of those games that really made me feel I really, really want a newer, higher end Switch that does has a little more horsepower, or maybe try that emulation side of things a little bit, because playing this game on a regular launch model, normal Switch, it looks great. It really looks great, but it's also man, it would really be nice if the Waddle Dee that is back in the background was not moving at 3 frames per second in order to save horsepower, or if it was able to just like maybe put a little bit more resolution on screen. It's one of those things where it's like it's clearly like I was playing it on my 4K TV, and there were times where it was clearly like scaling. It's not even hitting like 1080p or even 720p. I think sometimes it was like bumping the resolution down even farther in order to keep the frame rate up. It runs fine and it looks really good. And in handheld mode, you never notice. Everything looks fantastic. But if you play this on like a big screen, like you start noticing the seams a little bit more. And it's one of those things that just really makes me wish it's obvious, like from the emulation stuff, like throw some extra horsepower at it, and these very same games, these same executables will look and run better.
Yeah.
It won't take that much effort. So that's why I'm really looking forward to a new Switch. But man,
I'm just waiting for I'm waiting for my Steam Deck, and then
same,
and then you can run all your Switch games on your Steam Deck at a much better.
I have seen some things that indicated that at least some Switch games will run better emulated on a Steam Deck than they will.
I heard that too.
Actual Switch,
yeah.
Which I will give that a shot.
Yeah.
When I get my Steam Deck. Valve, I'm in the Q2 queue.
Me too.
And
yeah,
if you're listening to this, Valve, and you want somebody to check it out and talk about it on a podcast for a audience of literally dozens of excited people, I will be that guy for you, Valve. Just send it my way. Bump me up the queue, please.
That's gonna work.
Yeah, definitely will. I'm sure half of our listeners work at Valve.
Yeah.
All of them, in fact.
Valve, a company notoriously dedicated to doing the things their fans want. So if only all it will take is enough of a crowd request for them to get those to us.
Mm-hmm. I will never complain about Valve again if they send me a Steam Deck. Never again. Listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. You can find our show on the internet at www.theshortgame.net, on Twitter @_shortgame. We are on Patreon. The show is funded by you, the listeners, on Patreon, patreon.com/theshortgame. And Patreon perks, if you back us at even just $1 a month, you immediately get access to our Discord, which is where we talk about the episodes that we are doing or have done. And it's also just where we shoot the shit about whatever. And so if you want to tell us about your cool Vampire Survivor successes or failures, or if you want to talk about Kirby, I am down, and you can join us there. We also, of course, if you back at the $5 level, I will personally send you some Short Game stickers that will look excellent on your Steam Deck. And let's see, you can find me on Twitter at RayganK, that's RayGanK. Nate, where can people find you?
On Twitter at NateSTL.
And thanks once again for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.